I'm sorry. Okay.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
I just heard something that said this meeting is now being recorded.
It is. We're recording this meeting at the request of Resident Action Project because figuring that this messaging training is something that people might want to watch again. So that does mean, yeah, any comments that you say on this phone call will be recorded for RAP's glorious future. So yes, that is true.
Fantastic. I need to usually hear and watch things 2 or 3 times.
Well, hi everyone. This is Teresa in Seattle.
Hi, Teresa.
Hey.
I see Mr. B. I see Adam, who I haven't met before. Y'all want to say hello?
Sick, but I'm here.
Oh, hope you feel better, Mr. B.
Sorry to hear that, Mr. B.
Okay, so thanks, Adam. Adam is going to participate. He'll text in if he has stuff to say. Towards the latter part, Adam, when we get to the exercises, if you could text me whether you want to participate by phone in that or not. I mean, not text, that chat system. Just let me know as we get there, okay? Thank you. All right, I am going to get us going unless there's anyone else who would like to introduce themselves.
Going back to Adam, do you want to text in where you're from so we can get a sense of where you're from? All right, nice to put a face to the name, Adam.
Can I take it away, Divya?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great to be on with all of you. For those of you who are on video, you'll see that there's a video component to this, meaning that there's a slide presentation that will accompany my verbal presentation. If you're just on the phone, which actually I don't think we have anyone who's just on the phone.
Paul in Bellingham. Paul in Bellingham is his phone.
Okay, Paul. Well, as a backup to this, we can send you the slides or actually a recording of this, and you can watch it to follow through. But you should hopefully be able to also just follow verbally. So with no further ado, what we're going to do today is talk about a body of information, of research that gives us a lot of good, solid ground to work with on particular word choice when we talk about the issues of affordable housing and homelessness that will help us greatly advance our cause. On one hand, when we think of issues as fundamental as having a place to call home, or the fact that we have people sleeping outside in our communities every night, it's like, really? This is about words? Obviously, this is much deeper than words. This is about some fundamental pieces of what it means to be a human and what it takes to get along in any kind of society. But at the same time, the words that we use when we're advocates actually matter a great deal. And today I'm going to be doing a presentation that's going to draw from information that the Center for Community Change has helped contribute to, as well as these 2 organizations that I'm listing up on the screen. Public Works, which is a national organization that studies how do we effectively talk about the role of government and the need for government to invest in things that matter to community. And then the Neighborhood Partnerships, which is an organization out of Oregon, which has done some really groundbreaking work to effectively get ahead of communication and be really effective communicators on this strategy. Our goal today is to put you all in a position not to memorize a bunch of stuff and learn a bunch of new lingo, but actually to effectively tell the stories that you already have in your own experience. What has home meant to you? What has it meant to the people that you care about and love in your life? One of our goals in this training, when we think about a communication strategy for moving legislators, and that's what this training is helping RAP specifically do, is gear up for in-district visits with state elected officials so we can get them to move a lot quicker on the urgency of the housing challenge. But part of that means us getting coordinated. I think whenever we talk about issues of housing and homelessness, as I said earlier, we are on the moral right side of the issue. At the same time, just rowing hard upstream, going against the current, trying to make the case, it might feel good and morally righteous, but it's not necessarily the most effective way to go. In fact, this boat, and I'm showing a small single row boat, will always lose to a tall ship with many masts and many sails. And why is that? The reason is because the big ship has a whole crew of people, not just one person rowing, a whole crew of people working in unison together for shared purpose. And that's part of what having a unified, cohesive communication strategy is, to move our boat, the boat of housing justice, more swiftly to our destination. There's also something else whenever we think of communication and messaging, that when we use the same words, we establish a steady drumbeat, a repetition that lifts up our messages above the din that right now we're struggling to get across. I think any of us who've been doing this work for a while know when people talk about homelessness, when people talk about affordable housing, a lot of times the words that they use, the words that we all use, have stereotypes and really negative things attached to them, be they about racism or classism or sexism or ableism, you name it, right? We run down the scheme. One of the ways that we get through that is really using the tools I'm going to share with you today in concert, in repetition, where we can start setting our own beat for what we need, the public, the decision makers, the media, etc., and our fellow residents who we need to get more involved, that we can get them all on the same accord. So this really is about words. I don't want to overplay it and say, you have to say exactly this word or that word. But what I do want to say is some of the words that we look at as very familiar, the way we like to talk about stuff, can actually be very dangerous to us. Let me give you a couple examples. One is from my own experience. When I started out doing this work, I was working at a homeless shelter in downtown Portland, Oregon. Then I was doing civil rights and housing. And during that work, I had the opportunity to go out and speak to faith communities and neighborhood groups and tell them about what I was doing. And at my time, what I was thinking is, if people knew how bad things were, people are good. They'll want to get involved. They'll want to do something. So I'd go out and talk to these groups and say something I thought was totally reasonable. Low-income people need affordable housing. Unfortunately, when you just use those words, there's been enough, frankly, very planful and dangerous messaging work by our opposition that what those words mean to some people is lazy people need a government giveaway. I have never said that in my life. I do not mean that. But when my audience hears that, instead of me being an advocate pushing our issue forward, I actually was drawing us backwards without knowing it. That's one example. Another example is, and hear me clear on this, we know that we need to end homelessness. We know that it's wrong that there is homelessness. But if we just talk about the issue of homelessness, it triggers these stereotypes. People think, oh, those folks on the street. But when we break it down of, no, what we're talking about is moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas. We're talking about kids. We're talking about veterans. We're talking about our brothers and sisters with disabilities. That slight change in words goes a million miles to bringing our audience along with us. And this gets to some very important fundamental things when we think about building political will and trying to get decision makers to change their mind. This is a great quote from former President Lincoln, and I think what it speaks to is a couple things. One is what it says is, a lot of times what elected officials debate, what they say is a reasonable solution, is defined by what the general conversation is in the public. So when we look at like conversations that are about, we need to clean up the neighborhoods because we got camps all over. You know, if that's how people are seeing this issue, then the kind of solutions that they're going to see and what they're going to debate are going to be limited to that, these issues of criminalization and moving people along. When we collectively, as RAP, as housing advocates, expand this conversation to be about the fundamental right and need that all of us have for a place to call home, that is the shift in conversation that will begin to open the doors to the type of policy that gets to the housing justice that we seek. So one of the things here, as we think of it in communication, though, is that there's a lot of arguing that happens in today's society. And what we've learned in this communication research that I'm going to share with you is actually what we need to do is learn how to connect with people to the values that they already have and help them see how that aligns to these issues of everyone having a place to call home. So it's not about arguing. It's about figuring out how to connect with people. And this is really important too, because it has to do with going back to what I was saying about shaping this issue and how people imagine it. Walter Lippmann, a media critic from the last century, puts out this very important quote. When people think about what to do about a problem, how they imagine the problem, how they understand it has everything to do with what they see as possible as going forward. And we've been living in a period as a society that for the past 40 years, again, with a lot of planning and investment, the right wing in this country has shifted the conversation to be almost entirely about personal responsibility and not enough about institutional accountability. What are these systems that make it unaffordable for families in every market in the country to afford a place to call home? Why do we understand the issues of affordable housing and homelessness in terms of personal challenge instead of systemic failure? And so what we need to do is reframe and get institutional accountability back in the mix. Now, on this issue of affordable housing, this isn't the easiest thing to do for several different reasons. The first is that this terrain is already difficult to operate in. We know that our local governments need no money. We know that there's conversations, again, that are queuing up racist and sexist and other stereotypes that work against us. These tools that I'm going to share with you today help us change the terrain to make it more verdant so that the ideas of housing justice and housing opportunity for all really can flourish and grow, and we can be a part of that. So as I said, we're not blank slates. If we're trying to move people on these issues, we need to understand the cultural models, the knowledge, the stories, the experience, the stereotypes, all of the things that influence how people see the world. And to best do this, I'm going to take us very briefly into cognitive science. Yes, that's right. Me, not a scientist at all, is going to tell you a little bit about how our brains work and what it means about communication as context for what that means about this body of information we have about how to talk about housing and why it is so effective and so important that we all join on to it. In this part of the conversation, I'm going to emphasize three things. One is about values-based messages. So I'm going to define what is a values-based message. First, I'm going to define, though, what is framing. And this is this basic brain concept that all of us do. And I'm going to talk about how if we understand framing and use values-based messaging, it can change the conversations we want to have. It can make that climate more verdant, like I said. So this question is for those who are on the computers. You'll have to get off mute button to answer this. But there's a slide up that has a picture of some stars. And I'm wondering if anybody can tell me what we're looking at.
The Big Dipper.
The Big Dipper, that's right. Do you remember when you learned this was the Big Dipper?
From my dad when I was about 10, but I think I probably learned it when I was in junior high school.
You know, that's funny. I can hardly remember when I learned it. I think, you know, it's one of those things, I've known it so long, I can't look up in the sky and see it and not see it. And yeah, it's the Big Dipper, right? 100% Big Dipper. But what's funny is if we grew up in Russia, we would have looked at those same stars and said, it's a big bear. This is an example of framing. That doesn't mean that the facts are different. What it means is how we interpret those facts based on the cultural learnings that we've had, based on the experiences, shape how we understand those facts, how we sort those facts, and how we put them into play in our minds to help us understand the world around us. Framing is about how the brain defines and derives meaning from the world around it. Linguists talk about frames, and this is something that all of us do all the time in our brain, sort of like ready-made storylines that let us fill in the blanks based on experiences that we've had in the past, so we can quickly make sense of the world around us. What's important to understand about framing in terms of our work as advocates is every frame defines an issue. So going back to how issues are understood then helps us decide, well, who's responsible and what are the potential solutions? So if our goal is that we want to make sure that we are defining this issue as about fundamental access to opportunity and a core value that people, not just in Washington, but across the United States, value as part of what makes our society strong and vital, that we need to get that into the frame. So that makes us understand that this broken housing market requires solutions that fix the broken system, right? So that's where this framing part gets into direct use. Okay, I got another couple slides that, Paul, excuse me, you're not on the computer, so they're going to be a little bit harder for you to interact with. But I'm going to do this quickly with folks that are on video. Can anybody tell me what word you're reading right now up on the screen?
Affordable housing.
But it doesn't say affordable housing. It actually says a bunch of gibberish, right? But if you go back and I put this slide back, it still looks like it says affordable housing. This is a great example of the power of our brains to frame. We look at just the tops of these letters and they seem to spell affordable housing. That's what this training is about, right? So of course it says affordable housing, but in fact it doesn't. Looking at this next slide, what word is up there now? Anyone make a guess at what word's up there now?
Well, it's one on the right side, LIQMFI. That's that one. But it looks like homeless.
You can see the side of my slides. Oops, I didn't realize that. I thought you were getting a more exclusive look. Well, all right. So much for that drill. But I think the point that I want to illustrate though is that our brains work so fast doing this that even when we know something doesn't say something, our brains still want to tell us it does. This is how frames are all the time, and why it's so fundamentally important at the start of these interactions with elected officials and others that we set the right frame so we can get them to see the issues and see the solutions that we do as actions. So the next piece that I want to get to relative about framing is then figuring out, well, what are the housing frames that are most effective for us as we try to move elected officials, as we try to move the media and other people. And this quote I'm going to pull up, this gentleman, Frank Luntz, gentleman, I use that loosely, he was the lead communication strategist for the Republican Party for 2.5, 3 decades. And whether or not you agree with his politics at all, this observation of his is crucially important for all of us to understand. This goes back to what we're trying to do is not argue with people and convince them, but actually find out what they care about, what resonates with them, and how we can connect that to our issue and move them to our side, okay? So, and the good news is that we know a lot about that we know how to break this down and figure out how to move people based on linguist George Lakoff's concept of these 3 levels of analysis. The first is big ideas and universal values. So this is stuff like fairness, equality, justice. The second level is issues that are related to them, civil rights, the environment, public health. The third is specific policy areas such as housing levy or the state housing trust funds or a carbon tax or a toxic waste site. Here's what George Lakoff's point is that advocates for affordable housing and homelessness often spend all of our time on level 3 and sometimes level 2, talking about the specific policies and the issues, but not enough time laying out the fundamental values of why this is in all our self-interest that we act on it. And in that, to figure out what those big level values are for housing, fortunately, we have nearly 2 decades of research to pull from. For the last 18 years, advocates like yourselves, advocates in Washington and around the country, have benefited from polling that has found out from the public what are ways to talk about this issue that gets people excited and supportive. This public opinion research that I'm pulling from comes from states around the country, from research in Oregon from the mid-2000s, from Washington in 2008 and 2009, but then in states from across the country, from the Deep South, Alabama and Arkansas, North Carolina, to the Midwest, Minnesota, Illinois, to the East, Vermont, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania. The point is that there's a consistency in this research that gives us a great deal of confidence about how to effectively be communicators. And the big values that work for housing, one is the value of opportunity, meaning that having a place to call home is fundamental to people having the opportunity to succeed in other areas of life. A second is reward for work. We know that a lot of people work jobs that the wages they pay simply cannot keep up with the cost of housing, and that people in the United States actually believe if you work, you should be able to have that kind of basic stability. Security and stability are actually 2 other values that people associate very strongly with a place to call home. Similarly, responsibility to care for the most vulnerable. So again, when we talk about who is homeless, our seniors, people returning from defending our country, young families, when people understand that those sorts of vulnerable households are experiencing housing instability, or worse yet, homelessness, that's usually when the public wants to get involved. Fairness. Now you might think, fairness, really? Are we a country of fairness? But actually, this country, whether or not we always live up to it, we do believe deeply in fairness. And I'll show you some messages that exemplify that. And finally, the value of home itself. And I'm going to go back and emphasize this one in particular. But the headline is, when we talk about these issues, we really need to stop talking about, per se, affordable housing and stop talking about homes that all of us can afford. Very quickly, I wanted to get right, I showed you those high-level values, but what does this really look like in terms of a message? These messages were developed in 2008 and 2009 in Washington. They align very much. You'll see those values that I just highlighted. At least 1 or 2 values appears in all 4 of these messages. These messages have been messages that the Housing Alliance has consistently used, as well as they have been used in the successful ballot campaigns in Bellingham, in the city of Vancouver, in Olympia, in the city of Ellensburg. So this is stuff that's not just it's worked with polling, it's actually worked in the state legislature, and it's worked again in our local communities. So as RAP members, really figuring out how to work these 4 messages, 1 or more of them, into your pitches to legislators, that's really key, because it gets to those high-level value statements that we know are effective in moving folks. I just wanted to show you as an example, because I've been saying there's a lot of consistency across the country. Arkansas is obviously a much more conservative place than Washington. But look at these messages and how similar they are to the ones that I just had up for Washington. That's because even though this country might have a lot of different shades of blue and purple and red in terms of politics, there's actually a lot of fundamental agreement that we all do better with a place to call home. So when we think of our messaging strategies, it's really lifting this stuff up as our lead frames, our lead message frames, as a way to move even our conservative decision makers. Again, just reiterating it, these are the messages from Alabama. Look how similar they are. In terms of 2 fairness messages, I said fairness shows up again and again. Look at those 2 bullets around the second one. Hardworking Alabamans should be able to afford rent and still put food on the table. That's a fairness argument. Same with the next one, which is about veterans, right? That's about they did their part, now we need to do ours. All right, so I just wanted to say a few more words about the value of home and then lift up a couple other pieces about the public opinion research. And then we're winding down to where we're going to get to our exercises. So thank you, everyone. You've been doing a lot of listening here. So I want to get us into where we get a chance to practice this. I want to say, though, more. I want to dig deeper on the value of home. I just think this is like the gift that keeps on giving. When we're talking to decision makers and the media, the more we can do to invoke to them how personal and intimate home is to all of us, that for every family, for every individual, that place that you can go at the end of the day that's yours, where you can be by yourself, where you can relax, where you can have comfort, where you can cry, right? Home's not always a fun place. Sometimes we have tough times there, but it's our place. It's our family's place. It's our foundation. It's where we draw our strength. And I think the more when we're communicating to legislators that that's what we're about, it's not this abstract affordable housing, 4 walls and a roof. Yeah, that's part of it. But really, it's that fundamental thing it's as much of the walls as in our heart. It's that place where you lay your head down, where your kids can go to bed and get a good night's sleep, right? That's what we're talking about here. The other thing that the public opinion research showed us, and I know a lot of us do this already, but I'm just emphasizing this. If you're doing this, you're moving in the right direction. Whenever we connect what it means to have affordable home to other issues that are relevant, like, hey, our kids do better in school when they have a place where they can do their homework and get that good night of sleep. That our seniors, people who've contributed their life to make our communities rich and vital places, that they should be able to enjoy their golden years with some dignity and security. And that starts with a place to call home. That our brothers and sisters with disabilities, in order for them to realize their full potential and make the contributions that they can, they need to have full access. And that starts with affordability and places that actually meet their needs for inclusivity and participation. We know that when families can afford to stay in a neighborhood around schools, they get to know their friends and neighbors, and they feel comfortable letting their children play with other children in the local park. We know that when moms and dads are spending less time commuting to and from work, that they're spending that important time with their kids at home, or actually for any of us, to be home rather than caught in traffic. Boy, oh boy, what a difference that makes for all of us when we can turn off the commute and relax. And when people can afford to live where they work, that begins to look different. All these things that we know we need to lift up. And most of all, I think most importantly, really making this issue about people and the impact that a place to call home has on people's lives. These are stories you know from yourself. These are stories we know from our friends and family. These are stories we know from our neighbors. And really lifting these up to decision makers in a way that embodies these values puts us in an extraordinary good place to be heard and to influence. So again, these are the message frames that Washington tested in 2008 and 9. These are the ones that I'm going to suggest to all of you, that you learn how to make one or more of these message frames, something that you're very familiar with, that you can slip in seamlessly to your pitches as you're talking to folks, not just to elected officials. That's what we're preparing for now, but also when we think about getting more people involved with RAP, these are messages that inspire because they lift up the values that we Washingtonians associate with the importance of home. A couple other things about this survey that I just want to lift up and make sure you know, that the survey that Washington did, when the messengers that the public wanted to hear from, families who need affordable housing, people who've experienced homelessness, and people who provide homeless services, that is RAP. People want to hear from RAP. People will believe in RAP because you all have the stories that are about what life is really like. And lifting that up for people is going to be incredibly compelling. It's already been compelling as you've done it, but I want to emphasize just how crucially important your role is as leaders here. Secondarily, when folks in Washington heard these messages, they wanted to get out and do something. They wanted to get out and vote. We know that there's ballot measures that are going to go forward in Bellingham, in San Juan County, in other places around the state in years to come So not only is this, getting used to these messages going to help you in meeting with legislators, but in general, these are the messages we need to start rallying people to this important cause. So again, I said this earlier, these messages were part of the Bellingham Home Fund strategy in 2012. I just did a messaging training like this several weeks ago with Bellingham, with folks from San Juan. So really buying in and learning how to use these messages is part of a larger tide that's sweeping across Washington state. So I'm going to pause for a second and ask questions, take some questions, and then I'm going to move us forward into an exercise where we're all going to get a chance to do a little bit of practice that'll put us in good shape along with the training that Michelle's going to do on the specific legislative talking points. I think that's next week. Divya, you can chime in, or Nick, and tell me if I'm right about that date.
Yep, next week, Friday at noon.
Excellent. So this is going to be the messaging part that's really going to marry very nicely with that piece. So I'm going to pause and open up for questions, and then we'll get a chance to do an exercise.
This is just a general administrative question, and it might be premature. Are we going to be able to get copies of the slides, or maybe I would like just that when you have the WLIHA message frames?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And the Housing Alliance also has, different materials that also just have the message frames on it. There's definitely some stuff as follow-up that you can have access to. You can also have access to the slides. The one thing I always say about the slides is you might remember that first or second slide I showed acknowledges these two other organizations and their work. What I would say is if you have these slides, just don't ever take that one out because they contributed to this, and I want to make sure if you share it with other people, they get that credit. So, but yes, I will pass these on to Nick and Divya, and they will make them available to you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll send the recording and the slides out to the list, so you will have them.
Excellent. Other questions? All right. Well, and there may be further questions going forward. I mean, one of the things that I always think, and this really gets us into our next section, which is, it's nice to hear about something like this, but until you get a chance to practice, it's just like listening to another person yap. So let me set up an exercise here so we can give you all a chance to practice with this a little bit. And then what I would urge is, as you hear the presentation from Michelle next week, to think about coming back and maybe doing this exercise that I'm going to suggest, doing it again, really weaving in some of the specifics that she's going to share with you. And I'm going to speak a little bit for Nick and Divya, but I'll throw myself in on this too, is that as you are working on putting things together to make a specific pitch or getting ready to meet with the legislator, I'm sure that all three of us would be happy to review. And actually, Mindy, who's on this call as well, has had a couple trainings on this and is getting pretty sharp with this stuff too, and would be help. Because all of this stuff is practice. So, in terms of really getting good with it. So I'm going to take us into, I'm going to do a little setup for the practice we're going to do, and then let's just jump right in. So whenever we try to get somebody to agree with us or to come along with us in an idea, there's three basic things that we need to lay out. The first is the statement of concern, or what's issue, what's wrong, right? The second is, why does it matter? And the third is, well, what are we going to do about it? What's the action and the policy that's going to make a difference? So when you're thinking about putting together your talking points or what you want to say with your elected official, being prepared to always open up with a succinct statement, a clear statement that covers these three elements is very important. It really sets the tone for the conversation. I'm going to just make a couple general points about this formula, is that generally speaking, we spend way too much time on the statement of concern, what's wrong, Unfortunately, housing and homelessness are such serious problems in our society that people actually are pretty aware of it already. So the good news for us is you don't have to, if you only have a minute in this opening thing that you're going to say to a legislator, I would say spend under 10 seconds on the need. That part's already clear. What we really need to get into is these why it matters statements, these value statements, and then getting into them, what they need to do about it. What is the policy action that they need to take? Because that's really what we know from communication in general, how to move people. It's more about why it matters and what's the solution than emphasizing the problem. That doesn't mean that not to emphasize the problem, but what I really want you to focus on in this exercise is the why it matters part, because that's what gets into the values that I just did the training on. That's where you put that value statement in one of these Washington low-income message frames. And when we get to our exercise, I'll leave this up on the screen so you'll all be able to see it. And Paul, I don't know if you have access to email right now. If you do, perhaps either Divya or Nick can email you these 4 messages so you're able to do the exercise as well.
I do, but I just kind of want to listen and take it all in today.
Good enough, Paul. Good enough. Then getting into the exercise, the first piece, let's talk a little bit about the what is wrong statement. I already said this, but just to very quickly go through it. The MacArthur Foundation did studies across the country from 2013 to 2016. These were general surveys about attitudes about housing. 55% of people who replied, and this is something that's meant to be indicative of the population across the United States, had to make one of the 4 following sacrifices to afford their housing: getting an additional job, stop saving for retirement, accumulate credit card debt, or cut back on healthy foods. Over half of us. That is crazy. You don't know what's crazier still? Actually, it's not crazy. It's sickening and it's predictable that people of color and women are way higher than 55%. People of color, African Americans and Latinos, it's over 2/3 of households. What that means for us, as troubling and as much as that hurts the heart, what it means for us is we don't need to explain to people that there's a problem. If people don't know there's a problem, they have their head in the sand anyways, and we're probably not going to convince them. What we need to do is push them on the values, the need to act, and what that action is. And really, it's emphasizing, going back to, we need to emphasize this is about a broken market and that we need to do stuff that addresses those policy solutions that get to it. The good news for us is home is the solution. So next week, you're going to get the specifics from Michelle on what the policy issues that the Housing Alliance is taking forward. But for today, for this exercise, what I want you to do when you talk about the solution is say, and that's why we need more public investment in affordable homes, and then say 1 or 2 sentences about what home means to you and your loved ones, the difference that it's made in your life, the way that it's allowed you to thrive and get ahead. So this is the exercise. We're going to ask all of you to develop a 1-minute pitch. Since we have a small group today, I'm actually going to suggest we don't need to break into these small groups. Also, too, I see some people are moving around and may not be able to fully do this exercise at the final piece. So I'm going to say, let's, whoever's able, do the exercise, and then we can share our practice aloud with one another to close out the training. So with that in mind, here's what I'm going to ask you all to do, is I'm going to ask you to take 5 minutes. If you have a pen and a paper and you can write stuff down, great. If not, just, take some time to think and get this straight in your head. And then we're going to go around and we're going to practice making our statement. And everybody needs to have all 3 parts in their statement. A simple, clear statement about the need. That's the statement of concern. Use one of the 4 Washington Housing Alliance messages. Pick one that most aligns with the need that you put out there. That's the statement of value. And finally, the statement of solution. That's why we need to invest more in affordable homes, and 1 or 2 sentences about what home means to you. So does anybody have any questions about what the exercise is? I see Mindy waving as she's getting to a car, and I also see that Ren is already in her car, which might mean for them doing exercises is hard to do. We'll see. What we're going to do is take the 5 minutes for people to practice, and then whoever is able, I'll call us back together and we'll go around. I'm not hearing any questions, so here's the message frames up there. So take a look, and remember, it's the problem statement, why it matters. I want you to pick one of these message frames, and then the solution. We need more investment in affordable homes, and 1 or 2 sentences about what home means to you and the people that you love. All right? All right, so let's take 5, and then I'll call us back together. About another minute or so. All right, I'm about to stop the screen share so we can all see each other again. Does anybody need any more time with the Housing Alliance messages? All righty then. Okay, so let's see. It looks like we have at least 3 or 4 of us still on the line. We have any brave volunteers who want to do their 1-minute pitch to a legislator?
I
Mindy,
got to
the
be
fact
honest.
that-
This is Jennifer. I didn't think I had any questions. I just think I can't keep up real well. So I kind of got lost on, without sounding just like everybody else sounds when you hear them speak about affordable housing, concerning what is wrong, why it matters, and policy to take. For number two, I mean, what is wrong is, there's increasing need for more housing for more folks. And I'm not going to be speaking to any legislators. I'm just trying to get information here so I can speak to community better. Why it matters, it's better for society, and that's the big emphasis I like to take, for people to have, and people and families to have a home. As far as policy to take, I kind of got lost on that one.
Well, that makes sense to me. I think you actually did a really nice job, Jennifer, getting started. I am going to ask if anyone else on the call has any initial suggestions for Jennifer, because I think, first of all, the way that we all are going to get better at this is giving each other feedback. And then I have a couple suggestions I think that might help you make that stronger and feel more confident with it. But first, does anybody have any ideas or reactions for what Jennifer put together? All right. Well, Jennifer, what I was going to say is I think that you did get the three or the first two elements in for sure. What I would say is on that second part, and I know it's weird and awkward, but really I think picking one of the four messages and trying to say it verbatim. And so, looking at, just word for word, putting it in. And once you get more comfortable with the message, you might change it up a little bit and make it your own words. But actually, being unique here is not what we're going for. What we're going for is actually being repetitive around these same messages, that's a place of strength for us. So what I would say, if you're trying to talk to friends and neighbors, go back and look at those messages. If you want to, when you're talking about more housing need, if it's families, if that's what's on your mind and your heart, or if it's individuals, if it's everybody, which of those messages best works for you to make that? And then the last piece I would say is, it makes total sense that you have questions about policy, because we didn't really get into it today. And next Friday, when Michelle's on, she'll talk a lot more about specific stuff that's going to happen. So I apologize if that part was a little bit confusing.
That's okay. Thanks for your feedback. I was going to mention this. That's why I said I'm a little slow. If audio, I don't process quite as well. With the written word, I can do what you said, because that's kind of how I'm used to running. So that's where I was planning to go. I just couldn't get there. But thank you.
Great. Hey, it's all practice. Who wants to go next?
I do. I got to leave here soon.
All right, Ren. Yeah,
okay.
Go for it.
As an ex-homeless person, I have actually experienced living in my vehicle while I was working, but I was still unable to come up with the savings that it took for the deposits and finding the right place while I was balancing everything, living on the streets and working and looking. It was almost impossible. And everyone really should have the opportunity to live in a safe and healthy, affordable home if they're working. And even if they're not working, sometimes there's a lot of value that what we do and the things in our life that shouldn't be taken out of context. And that's why we need to invest in affordable housing.
All right. Woo. I love it. Yeah. Nice job, Ren. Who else wants to say something? I tipped my hand, right? I just gave it a big whoop. We should have given you one too, Jennifer, because you went first. You were the brave one. But Ren, wonderful job. Who wants to say what they liked about Ren's piece?
I like the personal experience relating that. I didn't quite understand that we need to do that, because I was homeless once as well, but good for you anyway on a personal note for making it so far after being homeless. But that was very convincing to me. It always helps to relate personal stories and then tie it in with why, we need to fix it, to show value to these people that, you know, we come from different areas, but to show the value of having housing. So, good job.
Yep.
Yeah, I liked it because it just went smoothly from the personal to the professional. And so it's this human being almost touching the representative or the person they're talking to. Very smoothly done. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, really well done, Ren. Anybody
Thank
else? Do we have any volunteers? Mindy just sent a group chat out. She had to go into a meeting. I think Mr. B.
And I have to go too. I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, thank you for attending. Mr. B, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I guess so. Everybody feeling quite well up, but I drop in. Everyone should afford affordable housing. Veterans, disabilities, people of color, or whoever it is. Why? Because we all need affordable homes. Me and myself, I've been homeless as a veteran, and I need it. So that's why we need you as legislators to speak out for us, to be our voice, to be our opinion. Me, I'm here today to let you know this and let you know what we need and how we need it and what you can do to help us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. B. What did people like about Mr. B's?
It broke out a little bit on me, but from what I heard, I thought that was a great one too. I like the diversity element of listing all the people that need home or housing. So that, and I had some other things there. You had a good ending statement too that would be convincing to me. So thank you.
That's what struck me as well, was the diversity. Just not just one, but you know, all of us together.
I also liked Mr. B, and this is part of just who you are, right? But you're very confident, and you really put a call to action to the legislator. You told him, you need to be our voice. And when you're meeting with the people that you're a constituent of, that your votes elect them, you should have that confidence that Mr. B does. Now, he's practiced at it. He's been doing it a while, so you might not be as powerful as him tomorrow. But I think that confidence that he has of speaking to an elected official, that's exactly the right way to do it. So, Mr. B, that's awesome. I do have some constructive criticism for you, which is on, I didn't hear one of the 4 Washington Housing Alliance messages. Again, I think you're a naturally good speaker at this. So using something like one of these messages, it's going to feel artificial to you at first, but I would challenge you to really try to figure out how to get as close word to word one of those messages in your pitch, because we know it's more than just like it sounds right coming out of our own vocal cords, that the public polling supports. When we talk this way, it's going to open up people's ears and hearts. So thank you, Mr. B. Any other final comments from Mr. B?
I got something to say.
Hey there. Welcome.
Hey.
Hey, Sharon.
Affordable housing is a place where families and guests are over and play outside in the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did people like about that?
The enthusiasm. They convinced me if I would listen to that. And again, it hit home to a lot of folks that, you know, it makes sense. I mean, nobody likes to be out in certain conditions. So that was a good one too.
And I like that you said I heard you say to be able to play. You know, that if you have a place to call home, it gives you a place to play. And I think sometimes we get so serious about the problems of this issue, as we should, because people are suffering. But at the same time, when we have the stability of home, life is not meant to be tragedy one after another. We are supposed to experience love and have laughter and play. So I thought that part was really excellent, because that is part of what a home means to all of us. It's that security, so you can let your hair down and actually, you know, enjoy your friends and family. I thought that was excellent. Again, I think working in one of the Housing Alliance phrases will really help make your message stronger. And then moving next week when Michelle does her training about the specific app, getting a solution piece in there. But I think that really, what I loved about it though, and I'm just going to say it again, is lifting up. Home is not just this serious thing. It's this part that's everything about human experience, good and bad. So, excellent. All right. Any final people want to go? We're right close to the end of our time. I think everybody who. Oh yeah, Paul. Excuse me, my fault. You're up. You take us home, Paul.
I just want to say thank you for this. It was a wonderful call. I've got to cut out and run, but thank you for all your efforts. Looking forward to hearing more and seeing more and learning more and doing more. You have a great. Good luck to you, and God bless you. Thank you. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you. Divya, Nick, do you have anything you want to say to close us out in the last minute or two here?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to you, Michael, for leading this training, and thank you everyone who is a part of it. We'll be sending these slides and the recording to you on email, so be able to look out for that. And we'll have a training on next Friday at the same time, noon, with our Director of Policy and Advocacy, Michelle Thomas, who is a genius in her own right, just as Michael is. So I and Nick.
All righty.
Everybody. So I just want to thank everybody for joining and thank Michael, and just say that I'm really excited and that you all. This is kind of the first of what's going to become regular trainings in capacity building to do real things. And Michael has kicked off the inaugural training, as has been said. We'll be having a lobbying training with more specifics from one of the finest lobbyists in the state, Michelle. And we're going to be doing storytelling, and we're going to be talking about community group and RAP chapter building, and just continue to develop and encourage people to think about what worked for you, what you might want to teach, so that we can learn from each other on a regular basis to start some of the work that we're going to be doing. Meeting with legislators, getting involved in the election, getting people to vote and knowing what's at stake for that, and advocating a policy agenda to go even further than the leadership took us this year. So thanks again for everybody for participating, and look forward to seeing some of you next week, and tell your friends. And happy Friday. My favorite day of the week.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Good job, Michael, and everyone. Thank you.
Yep, bye.